Really appreciate everyone joining us tonight for this webinar. For those that just jumped on, again, my name is Kim Humphrey with PAL, and this is our Recovery in Action series. We're trying to put these on a regular basis, inviting different guests to talk about what we think are appropriate topics. And tonight, I think, is one of the most appropriate, and that is navigating the holidays. You have a loved one that's suffering with a substance use problem. And having gone through a lot of issues over the years with my own sons and dealing with some of the difficulties of trying to figure out how to handle holidays, I can relate to this, and I'll probably be popping in with a few thoughts as we talk. But I'm really happy to have with us Ron Paterik. Ron and I have known each other for many years. He's a licensed substance abuse counselor. He also has personal experience with this particular issue, and he's been a friend of PAL for many years. And so, really appreciate you being here with us, Ron. And last reminder, if you have a question, we'll try and answer questions near the end of the session tonight. And if you could please put the questions in the Q&A, not in the chat. If you want to talk amongst yourselves or comment, you can certainly do that in the chat. We have Molly from PAL is also monitoring this, and she'll be looking at the questions. And if there's anything that she can answer specifically, she will. Otherwise, I will look through those near the end, and we'll go through the ones that we think would benefit everybody and try and answer as many as we can. So with that, Ron, welcome. How are you doing tonight?
Well, hi, Kim. I'm doing pretty darn well. And I'm really excited to be a part of this. I got to say, this is a really cool setup to be able to talk to so many people from so many different parts of the country. And yeah, so I'm really excited to be involved in this tonight, and I appreciate the invite. That was great.
Yeah, well, I know that you're very versed in this particular topic. As a matter of fact, we did a session on this a few years ago, and so this is kind of 2.0, I guess, on navigating the holidays.
Mhm.
But it doesn't seem to change. This is a time of year when a lot of things are going on, obviously with families trying to get together and all of that. But I guess my first question, just to kind of kick this off, is really why is it that this time of year seems to be more difficult when you're dealing with your loved ones that are particularly the ones that are active in addiction? And is there a reality to that statement that it is more difficult this time of year? Are there more things going on that make it tougher?
I don't know if it's more difficult. I think it seems that way because it's such an intense, there's such an intense focus on family during Thanksgiving and during the holidays. So I do think it tends to magnify things, and we can lose perspective very easily and quickly forget about some of the rough times, really rough times we've had during the year, leading up to the holidays. So, I think there's no one answer to that question. I think if we took a poll, there'd be any number of really good answers to the question of why the holidays seem to be such a unique challenge. But again, I think the bottom line is because there is a extra emphasis, extra like a spotlight is shown on the family, and it it'll both magnify the strengths in the family, but also the weaknesses. It'll bring to light what we have, but also bring to light what we're missing and what we don't have this year. And boy, so you can just go the gamut, the spectrum as far as emotions and thoughts during this time of year. Yeah.
Well, I remember when my wife and I were dealing with both of our sons, and you're very familiar with our family, and so
Hmm.
you recall, there was a time where it was a long stretch of years where we were having a difficult time dealing with this because both of our sons were either out, potentially either living on the streets, homeless. We didn't know where they were. Bottom line is they weren't here, and we couldn't count on them to show up even if we invited them. And of course, potentially that just led to even other issues if we did. And so it became really difficult for us when we would be invited to people's houses and things
Hmm.
like that because they'd say, "Well, come to our house," and then we'd get there, and of course, all they want to talk about is, "Well, how's your family? How's this? How's that?"
Yeah.
And so that would just start up that. And so we tended to kind of start becoming reclusive about it and just not wanting to interact and all that. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about how people respond or react sometimes to this issue of the holidays coming out, like with what you said, this focus on your family. And then what if you're not connected to them or they're really active in their addiction and it'd be a difficult thing to even connect.
Yeah. And, another element is those that have actually lost a family member.
Mhm.
So, yeah, there's such a contrast between, again, the holidays put this focus on family and this idea of, gratitude and joy and peace. And those are all obviously incredibly important matters in our life. But it tends to then magnify again what we don't have, what's missing for us during this time, or the fact that our family isn't united and there isn't a level of peace that we would and harmony that we would like to have. And so, one of the things we'll do as a natural response is to start avoiding, start isolating, pulling away, because it's just so painful. And so it's extremely understandable that that happens. And it's a common kind of trap for us to fall into. The problem is, as we pull away, I think we enter into more of a dark place with our own thoughts. We start to, maybe build up some resentment towards the holidays. We certainly start to dread them. Just all sorts of very, ugly emotions and thoughts start to creep in. Again, very normal, very understandable, but it's important to be aware of that as a trap, that if we go that route, it's just going to be even more miserable. It's almost like self-fulfilling at that point. We're not going to enjoy the holidays.
Yeah, and maybe you could just talk a little bit about this idea of dealing with other family members that either are not sympathetic to what's going on, don't know what's going on because you just don't want to share it with them. And you're just in this position where you're being asked to do things or people are wanting to know what you're doing and you just are not really in a position to want to do that.
Yeah.
And yet sometimes it's really hard to know what to say when people maybe just don't even know what's going on. And it just seems like a really rough time. I just remember having the same exact feelings about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's any number of responses, again, depending on what the dynamics are in your family. I know when I was going through this, my wife and I at the time, with a child that was out of the home and estranged from us, there would be a lot of pressure from other family members and even judgment, to somehow fix this and make it better for the holidays. And so, yeah, it's a miserable situation to get into. I think at the end of the day, you have to be pretty clear with your own boundaries of, why things are the way they are. And there may be certain people that it's good and necessary to explain that to. Others don't need an explanation. They may think they do, but that's really your business. And so at some points you have to just be able to very politely but firmly say, hey, this is a very personal topic. It's a very painful topic. And I need you just to simply kind of respect that. That this is, for us, this is the best we can do this year and leave it at that.
Well, and I think it's a good point that that for now kind of thought, like right now that's not what we can do. So you don't put a permanency on it like, well, we're never going to be able to, have these types of gatherings again, because you don't know. You don't know what the future holds.
Yeah, what I recommend people do is use that kind of phrasing, for now or this year, that isn't going to be the case, or we're not going to be able to do that or participate in that manner this year. However, and what I encourage people to do, because I think it's good for them to hear it, for us to hear it, as well as the people we're sharing this with, is the however, my hope is that this time next year, it will be much different. And so that helps people as well as it helps us to hear that, as well as giving hope to those that are maybe really struggling with why things are the way they are this year. So, yeah,
Yeah, and I think we should just ask I should just ask you the question I get probably asked, more often than not, about this issue, and that is, you know, should I invite my actively using, you know, son or daughter or whoever you're dealing with to
yeah.
my house on Thanksgiving with the rest of my family, knowing that I'm going to just say knowing that they are actively using.
Well, yeah, that question, and then the other question that often is attached to it, besides should I extend an invite to my child, should I buy gifts for my child?
Sure.
And my answer to both of those is stay consistent with whatever the parameters are that are in place currently. If right now the parameters are you cannot come into our house while you're actively using, then stick with that. Don't make an exception for Thanksgiving or for Christmas. Just stay with what's the boundaries that are in place. They chances are they've heard the message and they fully understand already that that's the condition. And same with the gift giving. If the parameters are that we are very strict in what we will financially help with and what we won't, then you stay with that same boundary. Stay very consistent with it. I see a lot of people where they've worked really hard to establish very healthy, very effective boundaries, and then undo it all in an instant by in that moment of weakness. And again, very understandable. You want the family together. You hope that maybe this time it'll be different
Mhm.
and let them in, relax your boundaries and then live to regret it later because often it just blows up in your face, or you have to go back and reset the boundaries all over again. And I don't know about you, but my experience with that is that that's just absolutely exhausting.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I
Yeah.
encourage people just to stick with whatever the boundaries are that are in place. Stick
Yeah,
with
and
that.
if they haven't dealt with this yet, they haven't come upon the first holiday, they haven't come
Hmm.
upon that, they're going to
Hmm.
ask that question. And, generally speaking, our suggestion in PAL is that somebody that's actively using is usually not somebody you should probably have in your home. And, I go back a number of years to many years ago when, we were dealing with our sons and we got together with some other people and they invited us, uh, some pal friends, and they invited us to somebody's house. And that was also a pal family. And we all thought that it was a situation where we were all in the same boat. So we were all like, we all have our sons and daughters are out there. And so we're going to
Uh-huh.
do this, without them. And I'll never forget, we showed up, and as we were walking in the door, my wife and I, we look over and there's a car in the driveway, and there's two young people sleeping in the car. And eventually we get inside and we find out that one half of the family, the mom had said, well, I, I just could not have them here. So I told them they can sleep in the car and they can stay in the driveway. And in the meantime, he's saying, well, they've been here for a few days and basically they're getting fed, by her by leaving food outside, and she's doing their laundry because they leave it by the door, but they're living in the driveway, but we can't let them in because they steal all of our money.
Right.
And so, I always tell stories like this because sometimes you can't make things up like this when you
Yeah.
look at them and you just are sitting there and I'm thinking, well, I did similar things. But of course, I just want to share this with you and then get your reaction to it because the next thing you know, she just couldn't handle it. And she just went out there and told them to come in.
Of
And
course. Of
they are
course.
completely, absolutely 100%, loaded. I mean,
Yeah, they're lit.
it was not good.
Yeah.
And falling over, nodding off, literally falling into the food. It was awful, and it was
Yeah.
really hard to witness. And I think sometimes, in thinking about that, maybe you could just talk about what drives that allows, us to go down that road and just somehow, somewhere in our mind, we just have to do this. We have
Well, I
to.
think, yeah, I think Kim, your story illustrates really well my point about maintaining your boundaries even during the holidays and maybe especially during the holidays. Okay. Because think of everything that couple had worked to establish
Mhm.
being undone in a matter of a day or two. And then, Lord knows what happened after that. But what drives that? Oh, there's so many different factors involved. Some of them very, very understandable in the sense of our desire to love our kids, our desire to not see our children suffering, our desire to not see our children cut off from family. I mean, some very normal and natural desires that are actually very healthy and good. Um, and then there's, of course, the classic denial. Like I said earlier, well, maybe this time it'll be
Mhm.
okay. You know, they can probably pull it together for a day and
Mhm.
come over and open gifts and have dinner with us. It'll be fine. And it's like, yeah, no. What is the pattern? What does history tell you? It probably won't be fine. And anyway, so yeah, there's a lot of different dynamics at work there. Certainly guilt is a big driver. I don't want to feel guilty, so I'm letting them in because it's easier to deal with the chaos that might come rather than my own internal guilt. So that yeah, we could go on all night on those kinds of inner drives and inner motivations, but again, that's where the pal community becomes really important. Being able to have people that you trust to speak into your life and go, it's okay, you're doing the right thing. I had a couple that I just spoke with last night who this is going to be their first Christmas where their 18-year-old son is not going to be participating with them. And it's heartbreaking. And they're struggling. And we talked about how to present that to him and still let him know, hey, we love you. You are part of our family, but you understand we've arrived at a point that you cannot be in the house when you're actively using. Is just and so um and they just needed a little reassurance. Ron, are we really doing the right thing here? And I'm like,
Right.
yeah, as hard as it is, this is the right thing. Now I do want to talking about the right thing. I just wanted to inject something here, Kim, for everybody. um, One of the big mistakes we make is we try to look for the perfect solution, the perfect answer. to the problem, to a very messy, very complicated problem. And rarely is there a perfect or right answer or solution. Okay. There's usually a series of okay or good solutions, but never great. Hardly ever do you find that. And rarely do the right decisions come without some pain. All right. Um, so I encourage people not to think in terms of I need the right answer, but because there aren't formulas. Formulas don't work in these situations. But what does work are principles, basic principles to guide us and to kind of direct us in the strategy, the boundaries, our responses. And so that's what's really important for people to have a clear sense of what are the basic principles. And I think this is where PAL is very effective in talking about principles that are tried and true. They tend to work. They're not perfect, and they aren't without some difficulty, but um, these principles have helped. So anyway,
Yeah, and I think that goes back to, the whole concept of, setting boundaries, being able to stick to those boundaries and realizing that, it's okay. It's okay to say to somebody, your loved one, that I'm not going to be buying you a gift this year and I'm
yeah,
not going to be giving you anything. And, regardless of what somebody else thinks or regardless of what other people might judge or not judge, it's okay to do that. And, we talk about this a lot. And just speaking of gifts, and you brought it up, is that, people will come up with all kinds of great ideas about how, well, what if I just do this? And I've heard it many times,
yeah,
facilitating a meeting for 13 years. I've heard a lot of people, and then I can go back in my own mind and say what I justified and what I came up with. To the point of, for example, one year when they were both out and about, but our older son was in the hospital over Christmas, and Michelle, my wife, just really, really felt compelled that we needed to give them something. And so our idea was that, well, don't give them anything that's, cash or anything like that. So she thought, well, I could give them some new underwear, socks, a blanket, stuff like that. And I'm going to take
right.
all the labels off of them so that there's no, I can't return them. And I won't even wrap them. I'll put them in a bag and I'll just give them to them, and then they'll use them. Only to find out later, my older son told me, we gave him all that stuff. The minute he got out of the hospital, he went to a store called Buffalo Exchange, turned it in, and got like $12 for this whole bag, which was just enough to go out and score heroin.
Get high. Yeah.
So
Yep.
maybe you could just talk about that whole concept of, our mind and wanting to give that gift and the boundaries and all of that.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's it's so hard to fight that impulse of generosity or caretaking, and see sometimes the long-term consequence of our enabling or our rescuing. We just have to be so wise. And so again, back to if you've established boundaries with your child that say, we're just not going to help you financially in any way, shape, or form, you stick with that. You stay consistent with that. Very, very important. And it's a great story, by the way. And I think I remember that story from a number of years back.
Yeah,
Uh,
sometimes I shake my head because I
yeah.
think back of, we wanted so badly, to do
Yeah.
something
That would let them know that they're loved and that you care for them.
right. And I
The
and
hard
maybe
the hard thing as a
mhm.
parent is to recognize that our setting boundaries and being consistent with them is an act of love and is an act of caring. It's so hard to convince ourselves of that. But yet it really is. It really truly is.
And I
And
think
then
that,
again, being
mhm,
able to forecast or, project hope that our hope is that next year we're all together. Next year, there are gifts under the tree for you. But
mhm.
and that is attached to sobriety, you know. So there's, being able to extend that message of hope, of connection, but there's something that they have to do, that they need to take care of and be responsible for.
Yeah, and I think that key there is that, we do not want to go down this road of what people refer to sometimes as, tough love or whatever, in the sense of that it's like abandonment, or that, we don't care, or we're not loving, because like what you just said, setting a boundary is loving.
It
And
is.
being able to help them along this journey in a loving way is important. And I think that lends to the next question, which is, okay, so I get it. I should probably not have them in my home, if they're actively using, or as you said, if that's the boundary, stick with the boundary. But let's talk a little bit about what can you do. So my wife and I found ourselves with nobody. We didn't
Yeah,
want to go, and so we're sitting there going, okay, so what can we do? And I can share some things that we did, because you may have been the one that even recommended it. I don't remember, but
yeah.
which is the idea of new traditions, new doing something different, maybe serving other people, something like that. So, but maybe you could just talk about that, because that's tough.
It is tough. Uh, it's one of my bullet points I've got written down here, which is embrace the different. Don't be afraid to embrace the different, and don't force the old. Don't try. Another part I wrote down here to remind myself is don't try to create something or recreate something that really isn't possible or wise. But embrace the difference. See, and this is a big one for all of us, and I talk about this a lot in recovery for families, is see this, as hard as it is, as an opportunity. There's an opportunity in these situations, and one of them is to allow for something new to occur that maybe everybody in the family desperately needs. A new, freshness to Christmas, to Thanksgiving, whatever the situation is. So allow for new traditions, allow for new experiences. Hey, let someone else host for a change rather than you. That's a new one. Um, Rather than you cooking the dinner and being responsible for all that, order the meal, do something different, go out of town, or do some volunteer work during the holidays and invite your family to join you as you do that. So there, if we were able to spend time with all the people that are listening tonight, I bet we would get so many cool creative ideas on how to embrace the new and do something different. The worst thing we can do is try to create the same old thing with this. It's like the elephant in the room. It's obvious to everyone that there's somebody missing, and it doesn't feel okay. And we can try really hard to make it, oh yeah, it's all good. And it's like, yeah, no. So I'm a big proponent in mixing it up and trying something new and seeing it as an opportunity for something maybe really, really life-giving, which would be, spectacular, obviously.
Yeah. Well, one thing, we eventually did, after literally sitting around and thinking to ourselves, okay, here we are, we're going to be all by ourselves at Thanksgiving. And we finally took that suggestion, and I contacted a a local men's refuge center, and during the holiday Thanksgiving, if these individuals have any relative they can go see, they would allow them to go to their relative for the the day, but
Hmm.
many of them did not. And so the staff would work on the holiday and they would provide the meal and all that. And so we called them and said, "Hey, we will come, let your staff take the time off, and we will make the food and we will serve the food to these guys."
Yeah.
And it turned into a tradition. We ended up doing it for 5, 6 years. We started
Yeah.
going back to our pal group and inviting our pal group, and many
I
of them
love
would
it.
come. And it turned into this amazing opportunity to get to know these people that truly had no place to go and had nobody. And for even that day, even though we were, miserable maybe the day before, that day we saw some potential and we saw some light, and we were able to participate.
Yeah.
And I think that idea of what you just said is find something, do something, and not have this, and maybe I'm dating myself, but that Norman Rockwell idea of what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah. Totally agree. The worst thing you can do is try to recreate former Christmases when you know it's going to be different and then sit around just feeling miserable or being alone. Um, so yeah, getting out, doing something different, and again, embracing it as an opportunity to find something very life-giving that might become the new tradition in the home. Um, Another thing that you can do is identify what's most important to you when it comes to Thanksgiving or Christmas and forget the rest. Okay. Identify what's most important and forget the rest. In other words, keep it simple and keep it focused. Who's most important to me, to us, and we focus on them. And is it around a dinner? Yeah, that's what's most important. Or maybe it's around attending a church service together, and that's what's most important. And you do that, and that becomes your Christmas, that becomes your Thanksgiving, and that becomes your focus. And you keep it very simple, and you forget the rest. You really eliminate things that aren't absolutely necessary uh, or become burdensome for you. Yeah,
So we hear a lot about this time of year, and even to the extent that suicide seems to be more prevalent, and it just seems to be a tough time for a lot of people. And with that as an unfortunate backdrop of what happens during some of the holidays, we have families and parents that are just they come to the PAL meeting, but they're just not, that you can tell they are not handling this well. Could you
yeah.
just talk about those warning signs about when it's time to get some help, and that people can even look for in themselves?
Um, First, I want to address the suicide issue. Uh, Interestingly enough, even though November, December can be a very intense time when it comes to family issues, family related issues, the myth that that's when most suicides occur is just that it's a myth. Um, the reality is, and again, interestingly enough, November and December are the lowest months during the calendar year for suicides.
And yet
So I
we
know,
hear about it. That's the thing, right?
yeah, exactly. And again, it tends to get magnified. But the reality is that that's not the case. I'm kind of curious from everyone who's listening what month they think is the highest month. If anybody has an idea or knows, you ought to hit chat and let me know what you think. But it's kind of interesting. I'll come back to that. Um, what was the second part of the question? Oh, January. I see that as that's February. We're going to go through every month of the calendar year.
Yeah.
Um, it isn't January or February, it's June. June is the highest month as far as suicide rate, followed by May and July. Um, anyway, the only reason I share that is because a lot of times that's another, we were talking about motives for parents to kind of lower their boundaries and kind of feel the need to provide extra care and nurture is this concern that, well, if they're alone, my child is alone during the holidays, that's going to push them over the edge. And tax month, April.
Mhm.
Yeah. um, that it'll push them over the edge. And I guess I just
Mhm.
want to simply share that that's rarely, rarely the case. What is the case is that that often precipitates a true low point in our addict's life to where they're far more incentivized to get some help. So just, keep that in mind, everybody, as you're, thinking through, the holidays and how to manage things.
So the second half of that is when we see individuals come into the meeting and they are not handling this well, and we can tell that even the PAL meeting, they're not they're 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 just in such a bad place. And I just
Yeah.
wondered if you could just talk about, even for people to recognize in themselves, at what point do you need to start seeking out some professional help? What are some of those signs that you need to look for that you're just not handling this well?
One of them is if people start coming up to you, people that know you well, and say, "Hey, have you thought about getting into some counseling, doing some counseling?" That's usually a pretty good indicator because oftentimes we can be the last to kind of figure it out. And
Mhm.
people that are close to us, that are concerned about us, can see it even before us. And we need to pay attention to that rather than getting offended or pushing that kind of advice away. It's like, no, I really need to seriously consider that. But I'll tell you what, there's any number of signs. If you are finding it absolutely impossible to sleep at night, you're waking up at all hours of the night, and as a result, you're during the day you're exhausted, you're finding it hard to focus and get anything done and be productive. If you find yourself sinking into these dark moments and you just simply cannot pull out of them, no matter what, the things that normally work for you are not working. If you see yourself starting to drink more than usual as a way of coping, man, there's any number of indicators that tell you that you're probably needing help. Oh, anger, that's a big one. If you're experiencing a lot of anger, a lot of rage inside of you, especially men tend to what's the word I want to use? They kind of sublimate depression and anxiety into anger. And so you guys out there that are listening, if you're really dealing with a lot of anger, that's usually an indicator of some depression, depression or anxiety. Um, but anyway, um, yeah, just and if you're in doubt, always err on the conservative side of going, you know what, I think I'm going to go schedule an appointment and talk to somebody and just ask them their opinion. Ask a professional, do you think I need to be in therapy? And do you think this is something that requires counseling? Or can this be addressed in other ways? So, anyhow,
Yeah, it it is a tough time of year, and as I go back and think about our story, and for those that know it, it was what you said earlier. It was the time of year where Sean, our older son, the incentive came. And that was because he was again in the hospital. He was very seriously ill. And when we got the call to go see him, the long story short is that when I talked to the hospital staff and determined that he was going to survive, he was albeit in really bad shape and he needed very serious care. The doctor admitted that he thought he would survive, and I asked the doctor to please tell our son that we loved him, but we weren't going to visit him and we weren't coming to the hospital. And we left on a vacation. Now, I'd like to tell you, we enjoyed ourselves and we were, smiling and happy as we drove to our destination. We cried most of the way.
Yeah,
But we got there, we did manage to have, some time together and to do something. But it was during that time that our son made the conscious decision to reach out and say, I can't do this anymore. And I want my family back and I want my relationship back. And it was when he checked out of that hospital that time after 2+ weeks that he arranged for a direct transportation to an inpatient program where he spent 30 days, with the end of which he had already arranged for a long-term program that he had transferred directly to and spent almost a year at that. And now it'll be coming up on 13 years here pretty soon that he's been in recovery. His brother
yeah.
is shortly behind him. So uh, any comments just about that? Because I had to learn that the hard way. And I will tell you that a lot of people would hear that story and think you were heartless.
They might, they might, and I think that's where we have to have kind of some thick skin. And the people that understand addiction and understand the dynamic of it wouldn't think you're heartless. And that's again why being a part of a community that understands is really important. People that don't, yeah, they could easily judge you that way. But the other thought that I had while I was listening to that is that Kim, if you and Michelle had at any time intervened with Sean, you would have likely short-circuited the whole process, and you wouldn't have had the outcome, which ended up being amazing. So again, being able to be consistent even during very, very difficult times like the holidays is extremely important.
Yeah. Well, let's
Yeah.
let's jump into a couple of questions that
Okay.
we've had come in, and the first one is what do you do when you haven't invited over the last few years your son or daughter, and they never come? Do you still invite them? And mainly the reason he's not coming is he's mad at her for cutting him off.
Mm, mm. Well, I would want to know if the person is actively using or not. If they're not, if they are sober, then I would say, yeah, extend an invitation. You're welcome to come. And then it's up to them if they choose not to or not. Um, if you feel, though, like when I do that, it just becomes an opportunity for them to kind of drive the dagger in and really pierce my heart with the rejection or whatever, then I'd say take care of yourself. You don't have to keep extending the invitation if that's the case. If they're using, then I'd say, yeah, do not be extending an invitation. That doesn't seem like a good idea at all.
Yeah, and another question is your thoughts on how to decide between, visiting a child that might be in sober living and staying home for a family celebration. And I'm guessing they're having a hard time probably doing both. And their
Yeah,
question
yeah.
is, I'm feeling pulled in both directions.
That's a tough one because we'll get a lot of pressure from our kids that are not addicts, and they'll criticize us for why are you giving time on Christmas to him or her and taking time away from us and the rest of the family, and it does really pull us, and it creates this huge conflict inside of us and inside the family. And some siblings can get, or parents or grandparents can get even more nasty about it, and kind of force like, well, you got to pick between it's either us or that your child, and those are really, really miserable situations. I would try to get creative and not make it an either or. People like to make things an either or, and then that becomes like almost impossible. So, just say it's not an either or, and I'm going to find time, maybe, to spend a little bit of time, get creative on how you spend some time with your child who's in sober living, and then be able to spend some time with the rest of the family. Uh,
Yeah, maybe it's on a FaceTime or something like
it
that.
could be a FaceTime,
Um,
with an understanding that after the holidays die down, we'll come visit you face to face.
sure.
Something like that. You just got to get creative, and you can't let people kind of put you in this either or scenario. Yeah, because you won't win.
Yeah. This next one is it's a tough one. This individual, it appears, is potentially taking care of their 5-year-old grandchild child, and their
Hmm.
question is do we tell our this 5-year-old that their parent is homeless and why he's not going to be joining them for the holidays?
At 5, no, they're they're not going to be able to understand that, and yeah, they won't be able to comprehend it on a cognitive level, intellectual level, and they won't be able to understand it on an emotional level either. Uh, I think at that age, it's just simply, your mom or your dad isn't going to be able to be here. And they may ask why, and that gets a little tricky, obviously. Uh, Either you distract them or say, well, they just can't make it now, but maybe, again, kind of extending hope, maybe down the road we'll be able to see them or whatever. Again, I would definitely need to have more information because every scenario, situation is so unique. But definitely a straightforward answer like that at 5, I would say no.
How about how do you apply these principles when the addiction has led to mental health issues, which has been this says which has been shown with high THC?
Run that by me again.
So you've got these principles, and apparently the addiction has led to mental health issues, which is pretty common. And it's this particular individual has dropped in that it's associated with THC, cannabis.
Hmm. So the question is how to
It's
apply
basically
the.
the principles like we've talked about, like setting boundaries and all this other stuff.
I would say that the principles apply no matter what the drug is. You know,
Right.
uh, it's yeah, and if the drug is causing significant impairment, uh, as far as family relationships or their personality or their ability to interact in a healthy way, a con yeah, the principles are the same,
So when you have
irregardless.
individuals that are dual diagnosed, they have a pre, mental health issue along with addiction. You want
Yeah,
to just talk briefly about that?
yeah, that's really complicated. Well, that's where you definitely want to seek professional help. Talking about a situation where it's like, don't try to navigate that on your own. You're going to need a seasoned professional, someone with experience who can really help guide you through that. Um, because, yeah, there are two ongoing issues there that are vitally important. It's the drug use and abuse, and obviously the underlying mental health issue. Um, but talking about principles in general, you first have to deal with the drug use issue before you can get to the mental health issue. You got to clear the system of the drugs to get a baseline read on what's going on mental health wise with this person. And so the sobriety becomes the first step and then moving towards the other issue, which is the depression or whatever it is. So,
Yeah, and that's typically, what we've heard is you really can't deal with the mental health aspect of it if they've got this overarching issue with the drugs. So
yeah,
unfortunately, a lot of the principles still apply until you get to that
yep,
stage.
yep.
So uh, maybe a couple more questions. This one is since we talked about the child, maybe at what age do you talk to children about their parents' addiction and or homelessness?
Um, yeah, again, that would vary. Certainly, as a child gets to be that age, 8, 9, 10 years old are going to start asking more questions. And then I think you give them simple answers regarding alcohol or drugs and what it is, the impact that it's having, and why their mom or dad really can't take care of them. Um, Homelessness is kind of, I think you got to be really careful with introducing that to children because it would create such a level of anxiety and worry about their parents' welfare. Um, and so I don't know that I would necessarily bring that up unless, you're just asked point blank, where's mom or dad living? You could just simply say, I don't know right now where they are. Last I heard, they were maybe here or there. But just a simple I don't know might be the answer. Um, Certainly, as kids hit junior high, you can begin to be a lot more honest, a lot more direct, um, and fill in more details. But I'm a really big proponent in letting kids be kids for as long as they possibly can. So you pay out that kind of information very carefully and very slowly.
Yeah. So our another question was around holidays. That they bring a lot of holiday parties, and many of the people that you go to these parties do not know or they don't understand your situation. We talked a little bit about that, but are there any good recommendations on responses to people when they start asking questions and basically so you don't end up just becoming the bummer of the party, or you end up wanting to leave like I did.
Well, my smart aleck answer is tell them it's none of their business.
Right, right. I know.
Um, I think the simplest thing to say is, well, I appreciate you asking. There are some problems going on here, but it's very personal and it's difficult to talk about. You say that, and most people that have any intelligence about them will very sensitively back away, go, okay, enough said. That to me is your best response. That way you're not glossing over it, you're being very honest, but you're also not playing the martyr or the victim. You're just simply acknowledging, yes, there's a problem here, and it's very personal, and it's not something that's easy to talk about. And then let's move on. you know. Well, how are you doing? Well, I've got lots of good support in my life and I'm doing well, and again, just and then you move on from it. So,
Yeah, and as we kind of wrap up here, and just let me ask you one last question, and it's sort of a part of a question that somebody asked because we dealt with this earlier. But the question is around again the issue of you've got your one child that you want to do something with, but you've got all the others, and the bottom line is that right now, this individual is making a comment that their plan was not to do anything with this individual, but they're feeling so guilty because
yeah,
of the drug
yeah,
issue and all of that.
yeah. Um, Again, back to what's most important. I think that the kids that are with you that are healthy and doing well deserve your time and your energy and your attention, and that's what's most important, to be with them during Christmas. And you simply let your addict child know that, hey, when the time is right, we'll get together, you know, etc. Again, based on whatever your parameters are, based on where they are in their recovery or not recovery. But yeah, I think you be there with your kids that are doing well, and really try to celebrate with them. You know, again, you can simplify it or you can embrace something new, but you're giving your time and your energy and attention there.
Well, as we wrap things up, and maybe I'll just recap, and then if you have any final parting thoughts, we've talked about just the whole concept from the beginning of, how do you navigate the holidays when you're dealing with a loved one that's in particular that's in active in addiction. And we talked about the need to maintain those boundaries that you already have. Don't let the holidays derail, those boundaries. Don't just cave in because of the pressure of the idea out there that this is all about family and I have to do something. And realizing that, those feelings of guilt are going to come in and they're going to try and hijack your thinking. But truly, if you love and you want to look at it from the perspective of love, it's more loving to hold these boundaries and to help them in a way that will potentially lead them towards recovery rather than fulfill this idea that I have that I just have to follow these feelings and these traditions and this nostalgia that it just has to be the way it always was. And that I
Yeah.
even convince myself that somehow, some way it'll be different, knowing full well that it'll probably be a train wreck, like a couple of examples that we gave earlier. And we talked about maybe setting new traditions or new ideas and the idea of embrace different, embrace thinking of doing something different during this time, whether it's serving or not fixing the food or going to somebody else's place or whatever it is you can think of. And then, as you said, focus on what's really important to you. Think about that one key thing that is important during this time, and then get get attached to that part of it and try and figure out how you can do that part again, maybe not with your loved one that's, you're not dealing with
Correct.
now, but in a way that you can still have some positive experience through all of this and realize that we do have things to be grateful for, and the holidays are a time that we can experience joy. And so, we've talked about a lot, even some more things, but I thought I'd just run through that real quick and then come back to you and say, any parting thoughts, words of wisdom, as people are about to head into Thanksgiving next week?
That's a great summary. I hope somebody recorded that. I like it. Um, Parting thoughts. I will say one thing as far as taking care of your own emotional well-being during the holidays. Do yourself a favor and keep your expectations very real and to a minimum. That will really insulate you from a lot of unnecessary disappointment or grief. All right. And it's okay to be honest with yourself. It will be different this year, and that's okay. It's not great, but it's not the end of the world. It will be different. And different doesn't always equate to bad. It's just different. And then being able to admit to yourself, I may feel sad. I may experience some loss. In fact, I know I will, okay, during the holidays, and that's okay. It's all right. I can feel those things, and it doesn't have to undo me. What will undo you is if you begin to awfulize those things. And by awfulize, simply what I mean there is telling yourself this is horrible, this is the worst, I'll never be able to get through this, or it'll never be the same again. When you start making those comments to yourself, you will ensure a miserable holiday, and you don't have to do that. And then the last thing um, to mention is that at the end of the day, if our faith is real, if our faith is alive in our lives, we have a treasure trove to draw from of God's goodness, His mercy, His grace in carrying us through difficult and dark times. And that we can't lose sight of.
Well, I really appreciate that, Ron, and I've appreciated you all these years, and I know that many people have come to see you around this issue, and I know that this is this is one of those things where you get a lot of questions just like we do at this time of year, and again,
Yeah.
we so appreciate you. And so, everybody that's out there, we thank you for joining us tonight. Quick question for you. If you have any thoughts about particular topics that you want us to cover, please email us at info@palgroup.org and just let us know. We'll take that into account as we plan more of these throughout the year. And again, hopefully you get to your PAL meetings this next few weeks and lean into those people that are there. And hopefully, you know what, we can find what Ron was talking about, and we can find something hopefully inside that will give us that opportunity to find peace in our lives in spite of the fact that we're dealing with such difficult things in our lives. So again, thank you so much for tuning in, and we do appreciate everybody and their questions tonight. And I hope that was helpful and useful to you. And God bless, and we'll be back again with another topic. So again, thank you, Ron, for being with us.
Hey, you're welcome. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.